So I'm kind of an ecosystem builder. My technical title is entrepreneur in residence for Elevate Ventures. But I get to help entrepreneurs in my old hometown. So we had to leave right after high school or college to get the resources for an entrepreneurship to kind of grow those things. And you shouldn't have to do that. So to be able to offer those things to people now, I would say is something that I'm really proud of, or being able to help other companies start and avoid the mistakes that I did. Because there was a whole, I could give you the highlight reel, but which is what all the entrepreneurs do, is like, here's all of my big wins, but most of us don't talk about the actual crap that we went through and how awful it was. And
absolutely,
I'd say the number one I see is talking more about their product than the problem they're solving. Everybody's building something cool, and they're really, really proud of what they're building. So they want to tell you about all the bells and whistles and how it does this and how it does that. And especially when you're dealing with like a professor, here's the research I'm doing and here's how amazing this product is. But what really reflects to an investor is how big is this problem? Because the bigger it is, the more likely somebody's going to wait in line to buy your stuff, or they're just waiting for that solution because it's a big enough problem that I'm going to pay you to make that go away. Every night we sit together and have dinner, and it became what were your biggest wins and what are your biggest challenges of today?
I love it.
That's a question we ask every night.
Yeah, I love it. My girlfriend and I do rose and thorn. What was your rose this week, and what was your thorn this week? So same kind of concept.
That's the Guns N' Roses version, right?
Exactly. No, that's great. So were you the entrepreneurial kid growing up? Did you have jobs, projects, things you were always trying to make work when you were growing up?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I've been an entrepreneur since before I was able to drive. I didn't even have a bike at one point in time, and I earned money to buy a bike by, you name it, selling baseball cards. I sold pumpkins door to door, even though it wasn't October. So I learned when not to sell stuff for sure. But if a 5-year-old comes to your door and tries to sell you a pumpkin in September or June, you probably buy the thing.
Where were you getting pumpkins at in so early?
So the people we lived in a neighborhood where you have these huge lots, and people after Halloween would just chuck their pumpkin in their backyard. Well, consequently, they ended up with these pumpkin patches they didn't mean to. And we're like, can we have those? And then we'd go sell them door to door.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great. I love that.
Neither one of my parents are entrepreneurs. And for whatever reason, since I was little, buying something for a quarter and selling it for $1 is just the best thing ever. Like, it's just always been that way.
I love it. No, that's fantastic. So talk a little bit about your college years. Were you exploring entrepreneurialism during that time, and if so, what types of things were you getting into around those times?
Sure. So all the way through my life. So I had a landscaping business to buy my first truck, which made it into a bigger landscaping business. My senior year in high school, we got this really bland senior t-shirt. So this is going to date me a little bit, but I made an Absolute Seniors t-shirt and had everybody's name. And that was like the writing on the side of the Absolute vodka bottle, which my high school was very not happy about, but I sold them just off of campus. So nobody really gave me much grief about it.
Yeah.
But again, it was still, what can I buy for a quarter and what can I sell for $1? So I made Greek t-shirts. I still did landscaping in the summer during that time. I had a flea market booth for a while, which I'm not sure how many college students have, flea market booths. But again, it was, I can buy something at this garage sale and then put it in my flea market and triple the value of it. And I found out really quick, if you could tell a story about whatever that item was, it made it more valuable. So it taught me more about entrepreneurship, and it just got deeper, deeper, deeper. So.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So when was the first real company that you formed, and what was it that you guys got into?
Um, let's see. That's a good question because it was kind of a gradient. So it's what's your definition of if it's the first one that I raised money on, or was it the first one that I would say, okay, I actually went to the state of Indiana or
Yeah, yeah,
to
like
Delaware and formed a company formation.
exactly.
Um, it was relatively late, actually.
Okay.
I was I undergrad was Indiana University, and then grad school was Baylor. And in between those two, my wife and I would flip houses. And this was, well, right before the real estate crash. So we did that for 4 or 5 years right before the real estate crash. And we would have 4 or 5 projects going at any given time. And my biggest problem was all of the timesheets were handwritten. So you get those at the end of the week. Somebody signed in at 8, 8:30, maybe 8:45. But nobody got there and clocked in at 8:13 on a handwritten timesheet,
Mm-hmm.
and they were not rounding in our favor.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
and you can't be at all 5 jobs in one day. Um, so we created an app, and this was before smartphones were ubiquitous.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the workers had flip phones.
Mm-hmm.
So we created an app that you could actually call an 800 number, and it would triangulate your location
Oh wow.
and tell you, okay, they were within 100 yards. You couldn't do it like now. You can say, oh, well, Cy's in the Dimension Mill in Bloomington, Indiana, and you
Yeah.
can probably even tell which conference room I'm in. Then I could tell you were in the general area, but it was enough to create something where I knew they weren't clocking in from their couch,
Mm-hmm.
or clocking in at the end of the day from a convenience store. They were actually at least near the job site. And that was Trugits. That was the name of it. It was a GPS-enabled timesheet.
I like it.
So,
Very cool. So did you code that yourself? Did you do all the program, or did you hire that out, or?
I actually partnered with a guy. So I was kind of the business side, the idea side.
Yeah.
Now I think you would call it a domain expert. We just didn't know what that was called then.
Yeah.
And then a guy named Josh, I took on as a CTO, made a ton of mistakes along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Ones that I now teach entrepreneurs on what not to do when you're hiring somebody, and
Mm-hmm.
what are you good at, what are you not good at. Hire for your weaknesses, not your strengths.
Mm-hmm.
That thing.
That's great. That's great. So was there any success at all with that app besides, for your own use?
Yeah, we ended up selling it to a home builder. I mean, it was, in the grand scheme of things of like, hey, this was a home run. It was probably more like a bunt.
Okay.
So yes, it was a successful exit, but on my entrepreneurial resume, I don't even consider that an exit.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, hey, I built something. It more than paid for itself just with our own use, and then we were also able to extrapolate some profit out of it later.
I love it. That's great. So talk about something that you are proud of that you've accomplished. One of those other things on your entrepreneurial resume that really stands out in your mind.
Sure. I would say the stuff I'm doing now, like if you said from an outward perspective, a friend of mine and I started a company called Cloud Choreo that we ultimately sold to VMware.
Mm-hmm.
That outwardly, I would say people would say, hey, that's his greatest success. And I would, I don't think that's the case at all. It's more the things I'm doing now. So I'm kind of an ecosystem builder. My technical title is entrepreneur in residence for Elevate Ventures. But I get to help entrepreneurs in my old hometown. So we had to leave right after high school or college to get the resources for an entrepreneurship to kind of grow those things. And you shouldn't have to do that. So to be able to offer those things to people now, I would say is something that I'm really proud of. Or
Yeah.
being able to help other companies start and avoid the mistakes that I did, because there
Yeah,
was a whole, I mean, I could give you the highlight reel, but which is what all the entrepreneurs do, is like, here's all of my big wins. But most of us don't talk about the actual crap that we went through and how awful it was. And, you
absolutely.
know, so,
Talk a little bit about what an entrepreneur in residence actually is. Explain a little bit about what that position actually does.
sure. So it's a little convoluted. I actually work for a VDO, which is a venture development organization called Elevate Ventures. And simply what that means is it's a kind of a hybrid approach. So on one side, it's traditional venture capital. I give you money, you give me equity. And then on the other side, it's the development piece. And we partner with specific communities. In my case, it's called the Velocities region, and it's Columbus, Indiana, and Bloomington, Indiana. So for this particular partnership, Columbus, specifically the Chamber of Commerce, came up with $500,000. Bloomington, specifically the Dimension Mill, which is a co-working space that I'm working in right now, came up with $500,000, and then Elevate Ventures matched that with $1.5 million. So we have this $2.5 million pool of money to increase entrepreneurship and innovation in South Central Indiana, which is a mouthful.
That's great.
But it's also kind of nebulous. So my job is to move the trains forward. So if you have 50 tracks that all have trains on it, this is my job to make sure that it keeps moving forward. Because after undergrad, my wife and I lived in Seattle, the Bay, and most recently, and most of that time, was Austin, Texas. And very entrepreneurial ecosystem communities. And there were way more entrepreneurs or startups that were investable companies than there were people that were willing to write a check. And it's the exact opposite in Indiana. So my job is if a slam dunk investable company is a 10, I run into a lot of 6s and 7s. And my job is to close that delta. So help kind of meet them wherever they are and help them get to whatever that next level is, or help them get investment, or help them with their pitch deck. You name it. So it's a different thing every day, which is kind of a dream job for me. I've always been a mentor or an advisor, but to be able to help people and somebody gives me a paycheck to do that is still kind of crazy to me.
That's
but
fantastic.
I love it.
Yeah, no, that's great. What are some of the common mistakes that you see a lot of people making? I guess when they're looking for money, we'll say. What are some of those issues?
I'd say the number one I see is talking more about their product than the problem they're solving. Everybody's building something cool, and they're really, really proud of what they're building. So they want to tell you about all the bells and whistles and how it does this and how it does that. And especially when you're dealing with like a professor, here's the research I'm doing and here's how amazing this product is. But what really reflects to an investor is how big is this problem? Because the bigger it is, the more likely somebody's going to wait in line to buy your stuff, or they're just waiting for that solution because it's a big enough problem that I'm going to pay you to make that go away.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Can you talk a little bit about, so when you're looking for money, obviously, your networking approach and your networking skills, I'm sure, come into play. Do you have any tips or advice for people that might be looking for money on how to find and interact with people who may, have the investment dollars that they are looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I give a kind of a talk every, probably once a quarter about here's how you raise money. And part of that is, okay, now that you have a pitch deck, how do you network and get in front of the people that you want to be in front of? And I went to an accelerator with one of my past companies called Prep Flash at Intel. So I tell a story that it was actually, at the time, he was 9 years old, but my 9-year-old taught me how to network. And so if you're not familiar with being in an accelerator, basically you live somewhere else. You live with a bunch of entrepreneurs, or you're essentially going to school, but it's a full-time job, 3 months. And that ultimately ends in demo day. So you get up and give your pitch and, hey, what's your ask? And after that, we had what's called a founders dinner. And this was like a big deal. Mm-hmm. Only the people that were either one of the founders or one of the advisors were invited to this thing. So the guy that actually ran the entire program, his husband wasn't even allowed to go to this dinner. And talk like these, the people that are the advisors for this thing are like huge, like Ted Kalinske, who was the CEO of Sega when the little blue guy, what's that guy?
Yeah. Sonic, yeah.
Guy. So that's one of the advisors, like really high-end folks. Well, my 9-year-old finds John Galvin, who's now a good friend of mine, but he was the head of education and government for Intel.
Oh, wow.
So he finds him and talks his way into this dinner. And I was like, all right. So I was a little embarrassed, at first. But then, so we get into this dinner, like really, really fancy place. And talking to one of the guys that I've been in this program with for the last 3 months. And they say, okay, it's time to sit down. And I'm kind of looking around and I can't find my kid. Well, I look up and he's all the way across the room sitting with people I didn't know. But it was time for dinner. So I was like, you find your seat. I was like, I guess he's all right. No problem. Yeah. So 2-hour dinner, I'm sitting with the guy that I was just talking to. And so after dinner, I walk over there, like, what's up, Jack? You didn't sit with me. And he said, well, let me introduce you to my friends. And he introduced me to a VC who we ended up getting a meeting with, and a guy named Ron Chandler, who's now a friend of mine. He was the CIO of UCLA at the time.
Wow.
Now he's the CIO of the Harvard Business School.
Wow.
And I've tapped him to be on the board of advisors for a couple companies. And I was like, all right, thank you for introducing me to these guys. And, here I am sitting with people that I've been talking to for 3 months. So we leave, and I was kind of, I'm still kind of embarrassed on this thing. And I'm like, dude, like we're walking across the parking lot. I was like kind of looking around, make sure nobody hears me. I said, dude, why didn't you sit with me? And he kind of looked up at me like with pity in his eyes. He goes, Dad, I already know you. I was like, holy crap. So my 9-year-old taught me how to network. He's like, wow. You sat with somebody that you know already, and you've been dealing with them every single day for the last 3 months. You're in with all of these people that are just high caliber and that you can learn from, and you choose to sit with somebody you already know. That's dumb. Like,
yeah. Wow.
Out of the mouths of babes.
Man, that's impressive. What's he doing today? How old is he today?
He's 13.
Yeah.
So he's angling for homeschooling next year, which I think is going to happen.
Yeah.
He started a startup himself.
I was just going to ask, is he entrepreneurial too? That's fantastic. That's great.
Yeah. So he loves coming to the co-working space with us.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I can't even imagine how, what he's going to do in his life if he already is picking up on things like that at such a young age. So that's great.
My wife and I will eventually work for him, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned before too, I guess we kind of went out of order. We jumped to the money side of things, but you did, kind of touch on, once you have a pitch deck, can you talk about creating that pitch deck and what should go in there and what shouldn't go in there?
Yeah, absolutely. Being as concise as possible is absolutely important. We actually have a pitch deck guide that we use with Elevate Ventures, and it's in a very specific order. And it's the same 10 slides that everybody else wants. It's, the problem, the solution, the team, the market size, all of those things. But we have it in a very specific order. Most VCs will want all 10 of those slides.
Hmm.
but it literally matches our rubric. So as you're going through those 10 slides and you say, this is our team, that's where it is in the question ranking for our rubric. Um, so that's why it's in that very specific order. But not going beyond those 10 slides is very important.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean you can't have an appendix that has another 30 slides. That's fine. But you want to have those 10 big things, like I said, really concentrating on the problem is a really big deal. And then I also tell people to have 2 different pitch decks, as well as an executive summary. So the way that looks in the VC model and kind of how you get in front of people is if Matt comes to me and says, hey, I want you to introduce me to Steve, I'll say, okay, yeah, send me your executive summary so that I can say, okay, Steve, Matt wants to meet you. Here's the executive summary. Are you interested in meeting them? That's just here's real quick, high level. Here's what they do, enough to pique their interest. Because you're not trying to get married right there. You're trying to get to the first date. So if Steve says, yes, I want to meet with Matt, then he'll say, okay, well, send me his pitch deck because he wants to be prepared for the meeting.
Hmm.
You're busy, he's busy. He wants to be prepared. So I tell them to have a reading deck and a presentation deck. So your reading deck, you're not going to be able to be in front of them to actually describe that entire pitch deck.
Hmm.
So they need to be able to read it themselves and get the gist of all of it. They need to feel the problem. They need to see how you're solving the problem. But then I also tell them to leave a couple things out. Because the second pitch deck you need is an actual pitch deck. So that's what you're going to pitch in front of the people.
Hmm.
A whole lot less words. You don't want them reading your slides. You want them listening to you. So it's a whole lot more pictures and a whole lot less words on the pitch deck versus the reading deck. But if you leave a couple things out, it kind of surprises them a little bit. You know, if you're presenting the exact same pitch deck that you sent ahead of time, they already know it. They read it.
Yeah.
So why do that? You know, if you leave one big thing out, it makes them go, okay, I need to pay attention because there's new information coming.
And what would be that thing that you would leave out? Like what types of things would you?
So again, it's like that executive summaries to get the first date. That next one is to get the second date. So whatever that is for your particular industry, for your solution, whatever that is, you need to put enough in there that they go, oh, I want to meet with this guy or this gal, but not so much that you inundate them with information and give them everything they need to know. So maybe that's, oh, incidentally, we have this huge LOI that as soon as we build this thing, we already have 10 customers, you know, something along those lines. Or they just changed a law that allows us to do this, or this is going to open up a new market and here's why. Just something to kind of excite them a little bit.
I love it. No, that's great. And do you, when you pitch these things as well to these investors, are you filtering the investors so that, you know, maybe you're pitching to, you know, I don't know, somebody that was in the transportation industry, you pitch them a transportation related app, or do you find it beneficial to, you know, essentially introduce ideas to pretty well anyone?
I think you at least somewhat need to match their investment thesis, because you don't want to waste their time, you don't want to waste and they don't want to waste yours. But that doesn't necessarily mean just industry. You know, if I'm not going to go talk to Andreessen Horowitz about a really, really early stage, I got an idea on a napkin. It just doesn't fit. So you have pre-seed, seed investors, you have, you know, Series A investors, you have late stage and mezzanine, and you're not going to hire, you know, or pitch a private equity firm about something that, you know, has 10,000 ARR or something.
Yeah,
it just doesn't make sense. So a little bit, you know, I actually, when I work with entrepreneurs, I have them make a list of all the people that they want to get in front of and why, and then I have them stack rank those. So that's not just traditional institutional investors. It could be angel investors, So we're doing a deal right now that is a social network for opera singers.
Oh, wow.
So it's essentially like a LinkedIn for performing artists.
Mm-hmm.
And she has a little bit of institutional investment in this round, but the guy that wrote the biggest check just happens to be a really big opera fan and an angel investor.
Mm-hmm.
That's her ideal, investment. And he was willing to take the whole round 20 minutes after she pitched to the IU Angel Network. So yeah, sometimes it helps to kind of be industry specific, but a lot of times you can't do that. If you're in transportation, yeah, there's actually VCs that are only doing venture capital deals around transportation. Like they don't invest in something outside of transportation. So if it is industry specific, that's great, but it definitely doesn't need to be.
Got it. That's great. Can you talk a little bit about some of the benefits that you've seen starting a company more in the Midwest rather than going to, the typical, especially if you're dealing with a tech company? Everyone thinks San Francisco, I have to be in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still see that as being a necessity today? And if not, I guess what are some of the benefits to creating that company or starting that company more in the Midwest regions?
Yeah, absolutely. Quite the opposite, actually. If I were to start another company today, I would start it in the Midwest. For several reasons. One, to the part I alluded to earlier, there's a whole lot more people willing to write checks than there are people that are investable companies. So there's a lot more capital available here. And everybody rallies around those entrepreneurs because they want to see innovation and entrepreneurship grow right in our community. And like I said, there's plenty of people that are willing to write checks. So Elevate Ventures for the first quarter of 2020 was the most active pre-seed and seed investor in the entire United States.
Oh, wow.
We did 21 deals in the first quarter of 2020, which is amazing during all of this, that there was that much activity. Now those are really early stage, under 100K checks, but a big deal flow. And then there's a lot of resources here too. Like I said, people really want to rally around an entrepreneur and see it grow because they want to be able to look at the things that are coming out of our community.
Yeah, that makes sense. If someone wanted to get in touch with you or with Elevate, or even learn a little bit more about your incubator program, what would you say is the best way to do that?
Probably the website. It's just elevateventures.com, or email. I'd give you my email, but my name is Cy Megnin, and it doesn't even look like it is spelled that. So it's cmegnin@elevateventures.com, but there's a G in there. So.
No, that's great. So what would you say is the typical type of company that you guys would normally work with? Again, is it industry specific or anything? Do you focus on any industries, or do you take pretty well, any types of ideas?
We are fairly industry agnostic, but because of where we are, it tends to be, a lot of ag tech, a lot of SaaS companies, a lot of life sciences, because Indiana University is also in Bloomington. So we see a lot of those things. And Elevate Ventures also does matching funds for SBIR grants. So consequently, we see a lot of people coming into our portfolio that are looking for matching funds and then kind of stick around because, okay, now we already have a relationship with this venture capital firm. We got a phase 1 SBIR grant. We got some matching funds from Elevate. We were able to meet a couple KPIs and get a little further down the line. And now we're going out for a raise. So we see a lot of life sciences deals for those two reasons, the grants as well as the professors that are in our region.
No, that's great. And would you invest in a company that wasn't in your region, or do you pretty well keep it in, in your local area?
So Indiana as a whole is all that Indiana or Elevate Ventures can invest in.
Okay.
But as angel investors, my wife and I invest in everywhere else. Um, because of conflict of interest, I don't invest in Indiana companies personally.
Hmm.
But Elevate Ventures does here, and I do everywhere else. So
That's great. That's great. And same thing for you too. You're pretty well agnostic with the types of companies that you'd be interested in taking a look at as well.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, hopefully, I think I've got a couple of people actually in mind that might, uh, I want to introduce you guys to. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
it'd be great to do a follow up and see, how things are going. But
Yeah,
no, I love this. This is fantastic, and good luck with your son too.
yeah,
He sounds
absolutely.
like he's going to be quite a go getter. So,
Yeah, I sure hope so.
yeah, no,
We also move companies to Indiana. We got a whole lot of resources for that too. So if somebody's looking to start a company and want to do it in Indiana, I can probably help you a whole lot. So
oh, that's fantastic. Excellent. Well, great. Cy, this has been great. Thanks for being on the show, and we'll be in touch, and hopefully we can chat some more in the future.
sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Cy.
All right.